In this video, we will look into something that looks very small part of your research paper, but is the most crucial and the main element of your entire research. That is the objectives of the study. Hi, I'm Dr. Kavya Shabu, founder of Research Streams, where we aim to provide career guidance and research consultation. In my experience with consultation of different scholars regarding their research papers and also their thesis, when they are stuck at a particular point, it could be not able to find the right research methodology to be following or the right set of variables, and even during the analysis they are finding that the findings they have in their hand does not match with the title and what they actually intended to do with their research. So here all these scenarios has a major root cause for these, and it's the same one for every single problem. It is the objectives of the study. So anyone who approaches me also, I first look into their objectives and then understand whether it is actually linking with their study. So that is why I've been saying that objectives of the study is very crucial. So now let's see on how, why and which all sections of our study does objectives actually affect, and then see the common mistakes and the problems seen throughout the objectives, and also help you in building different types of research objectives with live examples. So let's see why objectives are so important than more than you think. Well, objectives are not simply a formality where we will write a small section on objectives and keep it. It actually defines your entire study. If you have a good set of objectives in your hand, it will help you understand what data you require for the study, what are the different variables you have to identify and analyze, and also the different analysis tools that you will be using for this particular case when you have the objectives, and also which all findings are actually allowed and permissible for your study based on these objectives. So if you have a vague and unclear kind of objectives in hand, your entire study could be confusing, and creating a link between the recommendations or the findings you have in your hand with the eventually with the title of the paper will also be difficult. So now let's look at the common mistakes that's being seen around in the objectives of the study. For that, let's take an example of a topic and stick to that topic throughout this video. So for example, if we have a paper or a research paper or a thesis studying on the role of AI in organization behavior. So this title is quite wide, and based on this, what all aspects do you intend to study within this? That is what has to come as the objective. Now the common mistake number one that is usually seen is that understanding the role of AI in business. Okay, the next one, understanding the role of AI in organization behavior itself. Okay, so what is the problem over here? Understanding a concept is primarily required to do any research. So that is not to be included as an objective. Objective should be framed in such a manner that it is something that we try to gain or attain through research. So through this objective, we have to come to a finding and a recommendation eventually. So what could be the better option to do over here? Rather than understanding, evaluating, or assessing the role of AI in organizational behavior in a particular sector. Now, why did I add a particular sector also into this? Because in a first glance, the objective will look very wide and not clear and specific as to what exactly or where exactly are we looking into. So in what particular aspect of organization behavior you can add that, or in a particular sector, be more specific in your objective, and that brings out more clarity. So 2 points of objectives, a common mistakes has been comprehended as the first one. First is to understanding of concept should be avoided and more like go into identifying a certain thing, evaluating, assessing, or anything will work. And the second one was to be more clear onto like all the aspects on who does it involve, which aspect of a particular concept is being taken, etc. Now, the third common mistake that is usually seen is the objectives will be set in such a manner that it will be taking up different types of analysis, all that would be indicated, but those kinds of analysis might not be happening in your study. So, for example, you want to study the impact of AI in organization behavior. So, certain analysis has to be happening over here, like a regression could happen, a model testing could be happening. So, all this is required to understand whether that impact is actually there and if it is actually evaluated. So, if only correlation is being done and also some descriptive analytics or some just the total of it is being taken, that doesn't qualify to being finding the impact of a particular thing. That is simply descriptive statistics. So in this case also it does not match with the objective. According to the objective, do you intend to do such analysis? Only then make such claims. Let's move on to the next mistake. Now, this is a mistake which you should self evaluate. You can find it out by yourself if this exists within your objectives. For example, now we have the first objective as identifying the different AI methods used in for organizational behavior, and the second objective is assessing the different AI methods used for organization behavior. This is just a play of words, and usually the variables end up to be very much similar. So, a distinctive difference between these objectives and findings will be very hard to find. So what you have to do in such cases is you have to identify like which all angles of research are you trying to find. First is to identify the different AI tools or the AI aspects that is being used in the organization behavior. The second could be the challenges they have been facing to adopt such differences. And the third one could be on the cost involved or the economic feasibility and the social appeal of these. So now do you see this research has three different angles and approach for this particular study. In this manner, it has to go forward and make sure that none of the objectives coincide with each other in terms of variables and analysis. The next common mistake, or rather a trick used by some of the researchers, are after analysis they come back to write the objectives of the study. Now, this is quite tricky. I would not recommend this. The major reason for this is your study will not be aligned, and this is a forced alignment that will be made by taking back the analysis, looking what it could be as framed as an objective and going back to the title. So the reverse propaganda might work for some, but I would rather suggest going from with a clarity in mind, like what do you require, what exactly are you trying to study, and then analyzing what you have in hand. Another common mistake, or rather a practice, I wouldn't say a mistake because this is usually followed by some people, some do not. So it depends upon your perspective and view. So the next mistake that's seen is usually they will also state at the end the last objective as to be findings or recommendations drawn and developing policies based on this. So if you are structuring and finding a proper policy that could be implemented by government, then it's okay and good to go for a like objective for the study. Otherwise, if you're only providing recommendations and suggestions based on your findings alone, that doesn't suit for an objective because the study structure is itself like that. After findings, you will obviously be finding the suggestions and recommendations of through this study. So a particular objective for this purpose is not mandatorily required. Now we know almost all the common mistakes that we can avoid. Let's see which are the good types of objectives that we can frame. For example, in the same study, role of AI in organizational behavior, the first one could be to identify key organizational behavior dimensions influenced by the adoption of AI technology. So through AI technology, which organization behavior dimension is being influenced, that is studied over here. The second one is to explore employee perception towards AI driven system in organization settings. So how does the employee feel about these AI driven system? That is taken in the second objective. And the third one could be to study the relationship between AI driven system and employee trust in management. So all the variables related to employee trust and AI driven decision system will be taken over here. The next one is to investigate the moderating effect of organization culture on employee responses to AI driven workplace practices. Now, this here we have been mentioning also the analysis type that we will be using forward. So, this is also one type of objective. The next one is to develop an integrated framework explaining the behavioral implication of AI adoption in organizations. As you can see, this is just to develop a framework. So this could be used for conceptual paper or it could be an analytical paper also if you are moving forward to model testing and also theory building after the theory building. In simple words, to make sure that your objectives are intact, just make sure of these checklists. You understand through your objective that what data requires to be collected, what variables exist, what analysis is required, and how findings will be structured. So with that, you will have good set of objectives in your hand and your study will be having more clarity. So in case if you're still stuck in your analysis or questionnaire part, don't jump in right into the rest of the portions. Go back to your objectives, self-evaluate it, and let me know in the comments if you require any more help. If you're struggling with any part of your thesis or your research journey, feel free to contact me through this mail ID. Also, check out my website to know about the other services provided by us.